Discussing Jitendra Malik's presentation at the University of Michigan AI Summit. He talks about the title is "When Will We Have Home Robots?" And I think it's an interesting talk as always with Jitendra. He's, in my opinion, one of the thought leaders in robotics. Not just because his work is relevant and from an engineering perspective interesting, but he also is one of the few, I believe, who has this um, how should I say, he's able to kind of see beyond the algorithms and the formulas and the math and the robots and the videos and kind of give a more in-depth philosophical setting of where this whole thing is going. For example, there's two things in the talk that struck me as interesting. One is he starts with um, what is intelligence, what is the the history of intelligence, if you will, and it goes back to emotion is what requires intelligence, what fosters intelligence, and intelligence then also reciprocates this as fostering motion. So we see to learn and we learn to see, excuse me, we see to move and we move to see, kind of thing. This is in line with prior philosophical approaches, let's say by Fei Li. She has the the blink of an eye kind of approach where vision enables this massive Cambrian explosion of intelligence. I think they're both related. Where Jitendra is more aggressive is really on the motion side. So there's the three big aspects of intelligence. One is locomotion, one is navigation, one is manipulation. In other words, you have to learn how to move. Then you have to learn how to figure out where to go, and then finally what to do. So a robot has to have these three things. And I think that's a really, really good way to think about it. Like he dissects the problem into digestible pieces, intellectually digestible, but also from an engineering perspective digestible. We can solve locomotion independent of the other problems. If you take the Tesla, Cybercap reveal where that we were, happy to attend, and they had their humanoid robots walking around, obviously, most likely teleoperated, or most of it was teleoperated, but still they had to be able to move, and that in itself is a task, right? To the mechanics of moving, the whole balance and the actuators working properly. But then you have to have an autonomous moving ability in it, right? So one is, again, one problem is to have the mechanics of a robot such that the robot can move, and then there's the autonomous piece, so the robot can move by itself. So both of these problems are, they're just problems that Jitendra is pointing out in this talk. Now he believes that locomotion is solved. He presents several projects where they were able to solve the problem, and what stuck in my mind is particularly the sensorimotor movement as a token, as a next token prediction. So what they're doing is take the transformer model that has been very successful with language and adopt it to the problem of locomotion. And if you will, the tokens are, in this case, sensory motor information. The sentences are sequences of sensory motor action, and you use similarly masked learning techniques like in transformers to learn the next token, to predict the next token, and therefore to move around. So these types of robots, they can move around even without vision, actually, because think about it, like, for example, if you train a robot to predict the next token, and then let's say you walk and you hit something, then, well, you're going to turn left or right, or let's say you walk on a slippery surface, the sensory motor prediction machine will predict a certain force or a certain angle of the sensorimotor situation that will help the robot stay upright, assuming that it's trained on some sort of loss function that minimizes the probability that it will fall. So I think that's the way I understand it. The paper's in the show notes. I didn't go too deep into the papers here. This is not a technical discussion just for people that are new to this podcast. What we're trying to do here is really try to assess where is the science going, what are the interesting problems which are solved, and how can we transfer this to the entrepreneurial part of the world. And I think this area is really ripe for exactly that transition. So we have some really good advances in academia. For example, we have sensorimotor next token prediction. We have fine tuning with RL. We have a pretty good real to sim transform, so we can learn these things in simulation and then sim to real back to reality. So these things seem pretty good. I've seen this in many other instances now, and that leads me to believe that we are on a good path as a community here to solve these problems. I think the one problem that needs to be solved, manipulation. But before I get to manipulation, I want to talk about the next thing. So the locomotion, really good advances in locomotion. So how can robots autonomously move? They can use vision, they can use sensorimotor next token prediction based on transformer models. They can use both, and that can help them to also move around on different surfaces. One other thing Jitendra says is that what he's learned is very interesting parallel between computer vision and robotics. And in computer vision, you have to be able to generalize. So you can't learn. You have to learn that a cat in many different instances is always a cat, right? So there's a category called a cat, and that whether it's a black or a white or a checkered cat, and whether the cat is on a pillow or next to a tree, it doesn't matter. It's still a cat. The same thing in robotics. Certain actions have to be generalizable. It can't just be that you can only pick a cup in a very very specific circumstance. You have to be able to pick the cup in all kinds of circumstances. Same way we humans are able to do that. So I think that's really an interesting observation. Now, when it comes to navigation, they present a really interesting model, which sort of stuck in my head. What they're doing is it's called go to anywhere or something like that. And what the model does is it allows a robot to go anywhere. Let's say into what they did, actually they rented Airbnbs, so areas that they've never been to before, and they let the robot go around and find stuff. Let's say, go find me a cup. So what the robot is able to do is go around in the apartment and explore until it finds the cup. But what's interesting is also, while it's going around, it's taking it's memorizing instances. So it sees pillows, it sees stuff, and it memorizes it. So then when you prompt it to go find, let's say, a pillow, and it's seen a pillow before, it's able to find that pillow pretty quickly. And if it doesn't have a stored, if you ask it to do something that it hasn't stored, it will then go into exploration mode. So I thought this was really interesting. Again, there's a link in the show note to the sequence of the presentation where Jitendra talks about the video, which I think is really, really interesting. Finally, the last piece of the presentation is manipulation. I think this is where, according to Jitendra, we're still a little bit away from actual applications, and it takes some more work. And the most interesting part is a paper where they talk about look at videos where people, let's say, moving around a restaurant, picking up stuff, cutlery, plates, and all that. So you look at those videos, And then you transform the videos into a 3D virtual space. So you take the hand of the people that are moving, you transfer it in virtual space. So all the movements of the hand are just transferred into virtual space. Imagine like a 3D hand doing exactly what the actual person in the video is doing. And then you also have the object, which is also transferred into virtual space. And now in that virtual space, you can use physics-based simulation and do all kinds of things with those objects. The key is here is really the representation of 2D images into 3D. And Jitendra says this is something that he thinks the computer vision community will deliver on. And this is key. I mean, we've spoken about this several times. There's a lot of people working on basically, can we see physics? Now, can we see something in 2D and represent it properly in 3D? That's a problem. And then can we also actually learn the physics from just vision? Now, according to Jitendra, that's not exactly what they're doing. What they're doing is they're looking at an object and then using physics-based simulation. I think overall, these are all very interesting approaches. And what's really fundamental in Jitendra's work is his reliance on simulation and the real to sim, sim to real transfer. So that's kind of I see here his main work, because he wants to be able to do end-to-end learning. He wants to use learning methods. He wants to generalize as much as he can. And of course, in robotics, that requires some sort of simulation. So to summarize, I think the three big problems in robotics, which is locomotion, navigation, and manipulation, are being discussed here. They're all in itself very interesting problems. And for us at Orange Capital Partners, we have a large investment in NVIDIA. We have an even larger investment in Tesla, and they're both actually exactly working in those realms. This is why all of this is so interesting to us. And we believe that the transfer from science and academia to technology is happening, and that the technology can be turned into commercial products. And finally, what Jitendra says is really, really interesting, which is he says that he sees the analogy to the home computer. In the 1980s, the home computer was an interesting idea, sort of a general computing machine that people often didn't even know exactly what they can do with. And then slowly but surely applications started arising, the word processing, the Excel, and then internet and email. And, those were the killer apps that made everybody buy a computer. It was Word. That's exactly my trajectory. When I was in school, I bought my first computer to write, and then I used computers in my work on Wall Street. Basically, it was just Excel. That's what we did. We used Excel spreadsheets for all kinds of things, and then email was the killer app also for not just for computers, but for obviously for the internet. So the same thing could happen here, where we have robots that have these basic functions of locomotion, navigation, manipulation, and then we start maybe developing apps or specific apps on top of these robot platforms that allow the robots to execute specific tasks. And I think that to me it's just an interesting analogy. And this is also what I like about Jitendra. He has this ability to give you kind of a big picture view and motivate the field for you. So you don't just look at the sort of the engineering intricacies and the technical intricacies of the papers that he publishes, but you also see the big picture and the motivation for the whole thing. Thank you.